And
Yep.
so I went from 20% ownership down to 3.
Ugh,
Brutal.
brutal. Yeah, because that was the only way to save the company, right? Is to get in whatever the 500K or whatever it is that you ended up
Yeah. And people have
bridging
asked
with.
me, like, why didn't you bankrupt the company and just start it over? And I don't know. I just felt like that was wrong.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Founderlicious. I'm Adam Blake. I'm here with Max Feinhizich, and we are super excited to be here today with Art Pappas. Welcome, Art.
Hey, fellas, how you doing?
Awesome.
Great.
We're doing great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Art is the founder and CEO of Bullhorn. If you don't know Bullhorn, they make staffing software, leader in the industry, I'd say. About 1,500 employees, and you're doing just under $500 million in revenue. Is that right?
Yeah, that's all right. That's right.
$500 million. That's a big number. And you've been there the entire way. You started it in 1999, so you're year 24, 25 at this point.
This is our 25th year, which is really hard to believe,
It's
but
incredible.
it's been 25 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think you have less gray hair than I do. That's well done. I don't know if that's natural or not, but that's well done.
So those Mediterranean genes, being Greek, is like a real benefit at this age.
Love it. Great. Well, why don't we jump in? We thought, we wanted to hear about your story, hear about your current thoughts on the market, everything in between. We thought maybe we could kick it off by, kind of talking about little Art, what you were like when you were growing up. Where did you grow up? What were your parents doing for work? Were you entrepreneurial? Tell us more about you when you were a kid.
Yeah, so I was supposed to be a doctor
Uh-oh.
because my dad is a doctor. He's a psychiatrist, and my mom is a dental professor at Tufts University. And
No.
so my mom's side, long line of dentistry, like dentist, grandfather, uncle, my cousin now, who is my uncle's daughter, is a dentist. And like, there's just a lot of dentists in that family and doctors too. And then on my dad's side, my dad did not come from a line of doctors, but he was like the first to go to college and become a doctor. And like we just grew up in this like medical family, like lots of talk about medicine and lots of talk about patients and diseases and like all sorts of like medical talk at the dinner table. And I always just assumed like I would go and become a doctor. And in high school, I kind of fell in love with math and physics and science. And I think I tried to take biology my freshman year to get on that pre-med treadmill.
Yep.
And I was absolutely loving Calculus 3. And people were like, who loves that course? It was me and the engineers who had to take calculus.
That was me, by the way. Like for those who don't know, both Art and I went to Tufts for undergrad, not at the same time. I think we might have had a year of overlap, but I was in the same calculus class that you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, we're calculating the area under a curve in a 3D sphere. That's like awesome. Like let's, calculus in 3 dimensions to me was like so fun. And people were like, this is awful. Why do you like this? And then I took this biology course and I was like, I always hated biology, like the phylums and all that stuff. And like, dissecting frogs, like, and I wasn't squeamish. It was just like, I had zero interest in that.
Yeah.
Lots of interest in medicine to this day. Like I love reading like randomly controlled trial documents, like the studies. I love reading that stuff and like, oh, like how did this drug work? And well, is that correlation or causation? Yeah, these people, like I love like all the analysis of that stuff. But for some reason, I just kind of stopped on the pre-med course and just went long on math and was like a deep math major. And my parents were cool with that. They were like, that's cool. So what are you going to go to grad school for? And so, so then I got into computer science because I was looking for a job, and my friend at the time said, "Hey, I got this data entry job at this software company called First Call Corporation, which was part of Thomson Reuters back before it was just Thompson Financial Services at that time." And they had this cool office on Farnsworth Street in Fort Point Channel, which was just parking lots at that point, like a total, like that part of Boston is obviously completely transformed now, but it was just parking lots. And then this one company, Thompson Financial, was down there, and there was like one restaurant, and parking was like $6. Now it's like 40. But I would drive in there and park, and like it was just this kind of cool atmosphere, and it was a bunch of young professionals just out of college, and they had like a really great culture, and it was a very open culture, and they made software that was really important. It was used by like every every financial analyst in the world, and they had every single big bank on there and big institutions, and their research platform was really like world renowned. And so my job, they gave me a stack of papers like this thick and said, what you need to do is go through our database and go through these printouts and make sure that and it was a list of who covers what stock. So here's the research analyst at Alex Brown or Morgan Stanley who covers, and here's what they cover. They cover Microsoft, they cover Adobe, and they cover, back then it was Anderson Consulting. And like I had to go through and put in the stock tickers next to their name and make sure they matched what was on the printout. And this was not a job for Art Pappas. Like it was a really terrible thing to have me do because I have like no ability to sustain that kind of effort. And I went to my boss.
What year was this, by the way?
Sorry, that was my junior year in college. Okay. It was like 90.
So this is like an internship or something?
Yeah. It was a data entry internship. And $10 an hour, and I was doing it after
That's pretty
class.
Good.
Yeah, it was great for back then. And and I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, this came out of a computer. Why are we taking something out of a computer and putting it back in a computer? Like can't the computer talk to the computer?" Which was like my math major way of trying to talk about like, can't you write a computer program to do this? And he said, "I don't know. That's what we have you for." And I said, is there like a file that it came from? Could I like try and mess around with it to try? And he's like, knock yourself out. He hands me a floppy disk.
Yeah.
So this kind of gives you a sense of like floppy disk. Like most people listening to this would be like, what is that? Or
was it a 5 1/4 or a 3 1/2? That's the next question.
Look at you, right? It was a 3 1/2 inch. This was the mid 90s. So it was 3 1/2, which was like huge upgrade from the 5 1/4. And I just started messing with it. And I was like really kind of curious about how do you get data from one file to another on a computer. And that just kind of like, that was something that just like sucked me in. And, and I just stayed there super late that night and just was like trying to, and they had books around. So, because it was a software company, they had books around about like programming and SQL. And I just started trying to like learn, and I taught myself SQL. And that wasn't like that night. I wasn't like, I'm not that smart. It took me a while, but eventually, after like a week or so, I was able to translate the data into a format that could be imported into the database. And my boss came over. He's like, "Well, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I wrote a little macro to transform the data, and it's running right now. And so I'm reading a book while it finishes." It was a huge file that had to go through. And so I was reading in my cube, and the guy was like, "This better work, because I'm not paying you $10 an hour to read a book." And so, and it worked. And so that he was like, "Go bring this floppy disk to the database guys." And it worked. And then like nobody had to do any data entry anymore. And they were like, "What do we do with these interns?" But the interns were psyched because they all got to do more interesting stuff. So they didn't fire them. It was like a
That's
productivity gain and it was cool. It was for me, that was like an eye-opening experience of like, you can transform people's lives with software, and their work becomes more interesting and engaging. And so they said to me, like, "Why don't you go join the R&D team, and they'll kind of like mentor you." And that was awesome. Like, that was so much fun. And so I would finish class and through my junior year and my senior year, and I would rush over to Thompson to code. And
Yeah.
I just got the bug. I was so into it, and had so much fun with it. It was just like it was a really great experience and great company. They let me work on my senior year. They were like, "Hey, we need to launch this product by May. It's going to be a web-based product." And I was like web-based? It's like, what are we selling, books? Like, what are we doing? And it was it was an early SaaS product that they wanted to launch. And I was graduating in May, and I was like, "Well, I'm going to Europe after I graduate." So they were like, "Okay, you got a deadline then." And they gave me like a $2,000 bonus if I completed it on time.
Oh,
I've
wow.
never worked so hard in my life to earn $2,000. That was like the dollars per hour were probably like, it was probably like 3 cents or something, like. And it was me and this other guy, and we launched the company's first web-based product. And it was like one of the early SaaS, probably one of the first SaaS-based products on the internet. And it was awesome. And
So that was 97 by now?
yeah.
Did you keep track of the other guy? Do you know where he's now?
Yeah, he actually became Bullhorn's first CTO.
Oh, look at that.
So,
Really?
Yeah, Jeff Green.
Amazing.
And he was very good at like identifying trends in tech, and clearly, right? Like, he was way up on what was going on. And that was back before you could really read about what was going on the internet. And so it was that was an amazing experience and like really fun.
So it seems like you got pulled in. I mean, so if this is 96, 97, the dot-com boom was, I mean, I don't know if it was fully, it certainly wasn't at its peak. It was starting to happen, but it doesn't sound like that's why you were getting into it. It sounds like it was more kind of the technical challenge was appealing to you, and that's what was pulling you down to, this $6 a day parking lot in the middle of Fort Point.
Totally. I didn't even know there was a dot-com boom going on. It was just pure, it was just pure technical challenge and excitement around. Yeah, honestly, if you had said to me you're going to launch a client server based product and you have 3 months to do it, I would have done that with just as much gusto. To me, the medium wasn't that important, like doing something on the internet. In fact, it was like, well, where's the book on that? Nobody's written that. So it was sort of like, okay, that's kind of annoying. Like, we have to just figure this out ourselves. But in the end, that ended up being really great for me, because the next project they gave me when I graduated, they gave me a job when I graduated. It was either go there or Anderson Consulting. And the project they gave me was like, okay, we're trying to get our flagship product onto the web. And you did this other thing, and so you understand the web. And their flagship product had this enormous problem in that so even if you developed a web-based interface, you had to get the server software that they had written up to the latest version, which should be easy because we had written the version and it was ready to go. But when we went to roll it out, we had to upgrade the 2,000 sites that they had deployed software all over the world. And some of those sites were on like really old modems. And so it was like, okay, so we have to upgrade 2,000 sites without downtime overnight.
Oh, God.
And it was sort of like you're really testing the limits of like bit rates at that point. Like, and then we would successfully upload a new version of the software and the sites would start to crash. And it was like,
fun.
Oh my God. And so you'd have to roll back and like you had all this like pain that we went through. And it was like 6 months of just trying to get to a point where we could deploy software. And I was like, this is never going to work. Yeah. I don't know if it did or it didn't because I got sort of pulled into another job.
How did that happen?
Well, I was starting to get recruiting calls. And so I ended up going to work for John Hancock as a software architect, which was like a Kafka-esque experience because they hired me. And frankly, I never should have left Thompson. It was a great, of course, eventually I should have left, but like I should not have left Thompson for that job, but it was more money and they offered me a huge signing bonus.
And you're still like 2 years out of school or something like that?
I was like 6 months out of school.
6 months out of school and you're already getting wow, that's crazy.
Was that the optimization kind of algorithm in your mind, Art? Like I want to maximize income, so the more money, good name, why not?
I always liked making money. I was always into that. Even as a young kid, like landscaping, I was like, how do I work more hours? And because I had stuff I wanted to buy, like back when I was landscaping, it was like, I want to have like an awesome stereo for my car. And now I have an awesome stereo and I need a car alarm. So I used to just work overtime and I would try to get like promoted to be a foreman running a crew because you make an extra $1.50 an hour or whatever it was. Yeah. So I was always into that. Like, it wasn't like I was obsessed with money. I'm not. But that like the accumulation of that, like my bank account was like, that was a thing. Like I
seems like some amount of goal orientation, basically.
Super goal oriented. Yeah. And so I left that. I sat at John Hancock for like a week before they got me a computer. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be a software architect. And then I got my computer and there was no software on it. And I was like, well, okay, can I download this or that? They were like, no, we don't allow downloads. And I was like, I don't think this is, I just thought they were going to be like Thompson. And it was, Thompson, you could do whatever you wanted, download whatever you want, install whatever you want. You needed software. You could go to buy software and just expense it. It was a very different environment. And I didn't give it any time. 2 weeks in, I quit. I was like, this is not the place for me. Very immature. Like I should have gone to my boss and said, I'm really unhappy.
Explain the problem.
I just quit. I was like a total idiot. And it was really hard getting a job. And he was super mad too. He was like, you're paying that signing bonus back. And I was like, but I just bought a couch. What do I do? So yeah.
So you quit with no job. You're just like, all right, I got no job. I'm quitting. Did you try to go back to Thompson?
Total 21-year-old mistake, right? 22-year-old mistake, right? And so no prefrontal cortex, right? Like you're just not thinking through the long-term consequences. I was like, it was so easy to get that job. I'll just get another one. Well, explaining to an employer why you don't have a job. And it's like, well, I was there 2 weeks and people were like, you sound like you're kind of a nut job. And it was really hard getting a job. And now the job I took this job at a startup and it was kind of crazy. It was a small startup and they had this like really successful print accelerator card product that they were like they got to like 5 million in revenue and everybody wanted this speed up their printer. and they sold a ton of this like physical card you'd stick into your printer to make it print faster. And then they were trying to come up with a second act because like printers were naturally getting faster on their own. Manufacturers just took their tech and copied it. And so they hired me and they said, we've got this idea that we can help people figure out the quality of their printer. And there's like a big market for this tech. And it was like, what? Okay. Explain that to me again. Like if I have a printer and I know that like when it prints something out, it looks like crap. Like, why do I need software to analyze it? And they were like, no, this is for like high-end printers, like that cost tens of thousands of dollars. Like downtime in these print shops is like a big deal. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to put it on the internet and all this stuff. And this was a good lesson for me. It's a huge lesson, which is like product market fit is a big deal. And a lot of times people have ideas about what customers want that don't align. So I went and demoed the software to Xerox. So I spent 6 months with this guy building the software. He's like, Xerox is going to love this. I've got all these connections. We flew to Xerox headquarters. He did get the meeting and he like had me do the demo. And I'm like, see, and this is how it works. And then you can upload this. And next thing you know, it tells you there's a problem with scatter or something. I forget what the terms were, but it was sophisticated tech that we built. And the guy at Xerox is like, but who needs that?
Oh God. Yeah.
I was like,
Xerox doesn't need it, that's not good.
I was like, well, consumers maybe to help. He's like, no, consumers print out the printer, and that, like if it prints well, they know it, and if it doesn't print well, they're like, this thing sucks. And so I was like, high-end print shops, and he's like, we build stuff like that into our software already. Like we alert them when there's a print quality problem. Like that's kind of what we do. And I looked at the guy. I was like,
did you not talk to anybody?
Right. Did you do any like actual research, or did you guys just like come up with this in a vacuum? And we're flying back, and he's like, yeah, and we're running out of money. So I'm going to have to lay everybody off on Monday, and you get 3 weeks of severance.
Oh God, really? Right after that first meeting?
Yeah. Is this like 2000? What year?
This was 1990. This was summer 1999.
Okay.
And it was, but that was honestly like, that was incredible timing because I had just met my co-founder, Barry Hinckley, and he had told me he wanted to start a business. And I was thinking like, that could be fun someday, but I don't know. I have a job. I have steady income. Like, I don't know. And
why were you thinking? I'm curious about the entrepreneurship angle, right? Because it seems like very job oriented. Doctor originally, then you were job oriented coming out of school. When did that entrepreneurial bug start sort of happening?
Great question. Honestly, like I feel a little bit like an outlier in the entrepreneurial community in that I was not somebody who's like, I'm going to start my own business. Yeah. I was like, that could be fun, but it terrifies me.
Yeah.
The thought of leaving a steady income. And meanwhile, my parents are like, so when are you going back to grad school?
Right.
Every time
what are you going to study?
What are you going to study? I'm like, I don't know maybe I'll get an MBA. And I was talking about getting an MBA, and I really should have gotten an MBA, guys. Like that.
It's a lot of fun. We had a blast.
Been really helpful, actually. But then I get laid off, and I'm like, I have 3 weeks of pay. Let's see if we can get something going. And that was sort of enough of a, like, God gave me a little push, it was like, hey, here you go. Like, start this thing. And we started Bullhorn.
But I got a question. So do you think that the fact that, I don't want to call them jokers, but they weren't very professional by what you were telling us and how they developed the product. And then it's like, oh, we're out of money. Everybody's got to go. Like, do you think it's like, if they can do it, I can do it? A little bit of that going on, like, psychologically?
There was definitely wait a minute. So this guy's the CEO of a software company, and he just basically had an idea that didn't work. I actually have lots of ideas. Maybe some of my ideas will work. Like I kind of knew, and I think it was, Max, it's a great question because like it was validation of like my gut was right. Like I knew
Yeah.
this wasn't going to work.
You're not an
understand.
imposter.
Well, like I understand customers pretty well, and like I understand business, and like why would you pay for something that tells you something that you can see with your own two eyes, right? Like
Yeah.
like I already have a scanner. It's called my eyes. Like I don't need software to tell me this looks like crap. And that was the like, okay, like I have good instincts here. It was sort of the lesson. And yeah, so then we started Bullhorn. And
but 3 weeks is not enough time to start a company. I mean, what were you thinking? You couldn't seriously have been thinking you're going to start selling a product in 3 weeks. I mean, were you? I mean, were you actually thinking that? Like, I mean, what?
You're 24 years old. You're like,
What
just
was the
want to
plan?
start.
I can stretch this to 4 weeks.
I just want to
5
start,
weeks.
and then we'll see where it takes us. And I think it was. I think I also had a decent amount of money saved, and I was like, I can go more than 3 weeks. I'm not spending that much, right? 3 weeks of pay was probably 10, 12 weeks of expenses. And then I had savings that I could dip into if need be. And I think that was the calculus. And then I remember being in the grocery store, and I was like, well, I'm going to be home a lot. I should get more food than I
Normally buy.
Home. I don't have a job. And then I was like, I should really be thoughtful about what I spend my money on because I don't have a job. Like, that was a huge revelation. It was like a moment, and I froze in the aisle, and I was like, oh my God. But but it was 99 too, right? And the funding environment was so easy. So we put together a PowerPoint presentation that said, we're going to build a freelance marketplace that for creative talent that allows you to hire creative talent to do freelance jobs on the internet, which was the key phrase. And it was 7 pages with some screenshots that I had mocked up with a designer friend. And it was like, that was it. We raised $1.4 million from angels. And these were like guys that were friends of Barry's through his boarding school that he went to. And they were like, they were just like, we want to get in on the action on the internet.
Right.
You mentioned you had already met Barry, but how did that happen? I mean, a lot of people talk about, co-founders and finding that match and, the chemistry. Like, it seems like you just found this person and it all kind of,
serendipity. He was working with a friend of mine, and she said, you should meet Barry because like you guys should start a company together. And so to her credit, she kind of like thought, Art, you're the technical guy. Barry's a very compelling salesperson. He was a salesperson at this company. And he's very good with people and turn of phrase. And so there was a really good combo, right? Like back then, now today it'd be like, well, you need a bunch of you need 3 technical founders or whatever. But he was like he was the guy who was unafraid to go talk to investors. I had no illusions that I would ever be good at that. I've learned to become good at that over 25 years, but that was back when 25 years ago, I was sort of like there to answer technical questions for the investors. And then, as we started pitching, I started to realize, oh, you can just talk to these people. They're normal people. They don't chew glass or something like that, like they're
totally. Had he quit his job as well? Because you had your 3 weeks of severance, but what about him?
When I got laid off, he was like, okay, me too. I'm going to quit. And I think he was ready to go. He was more risk tolerant than I was. I was pretty I needed the push. He didn't need the push.
Okay.
So,
and you had a third co-founder, right? When did he come into the picture?
Roger. we met Roger through the same friend of mine. She introduced me to Roger. And
Did this
I
friend
met
get
Roger.
advisor shares at some point, I hope, in
She
Bullhorn?
did, yeah.
Okay,
She
good.
did. Yeah. And then Roger was like, I will join when you guys get funding.
Okay.
But he basically was working at Deloitte, and he was like, I'll be the CFO. I'll make sure you guys like don't make any dumb decisions financially, which I was like, that sounds like we need that. And he helped us get incorporated, and he actually like worked while he was at Deloitte, and he's truly a co-founder in that he was working for us before we even really launched. And so so he came on the moment we secured the funding, and
got it.
Which didn't take long. It took like 2 weeks. So that
was what I was going to ask. So you'd started off with like, how long did it take to raise money? Only 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks before we got in front of investors, and we met a bunch of them in New York at Rockefeller Plaza. Like Barry had a friend who had an office there, and it was like all Barry's friends from high school and his network, and then my cousin who was like a Wall Street guy, and that was it. And we raised a ton of money.
So like 4 weeks in or something like that, you've raised 1 point. So 99 sounds a lot like 2021, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the revenue multiple was infinite. So it was a price round at a $10 million pre. With
$10 million. It's really very similar to 2021. I mean, not maybe a little bit lower, but
it's $14 million post. Huge mistake. Price round. Huge mistake.
Tell us more about that.
Well, this is why people do safes now, because, so we actually were able to raise a Series A because we got some product traction and we got the product out there. But it was really hard because the market collapsed. And so the market in 2001, when we were trying to close our A, was very similar to the market now.
Yeah.
Really, investors were risk off, super sour on anything internet because they had all lost their shirts on a bunch of stuff that went public and then got eviscerated. And so, so we had to do our A as a flat round to the, and so the A was, I think, a $10 million pre. And so instantly you've got the angels already kind of like sideways. And then we had to pivot because that marketplace idea, it was too early, very hard to get people to adopt and pay to connect with talent online. And so we pivoted to become a staffing software company, and we got to like 300K of ARR, something like that, maybe 400K. And we were running out of cash. And the guys that led our Series A, half of that money evaporated because internet.com went out of business, and they distributed shares to LPs. And GE Asset Management said, we don't do venture anymore. And this was like the pension trust division of GE Asset Management. And so they're like, we're out. And by the way, we have a full ratchet. So like, anybody who
explain to people who aren't familiar, because a lot of people haven't been dealing with that recently. So, what does that mean?
I've heard they're back, which is interesting that investors
I would never sign one of those.
Yeah, you can't, because so here's what happens. So let's say Art Pappas is on the cap table, 3 founders, he owns 30%. They do their Series A. Now he's down to 20%. Still awesome percentage of any business to own. Now you do a $5 million pre-money valuation for 500K of additional capital to bridge you to profitability. Right? Like all I need is 500K, or no, it was like, I forget what it was, but it was something like that. Those were the numbers. Rough, like just directionally down round from the Series A. So the Series A was a 14 million post as well. Yeah. So sorry, I'm sorry. The original, doesn't matter what it was, but it's 25 years ago. Who the hell cares? But so you're doing a down round from the $14 million post, and what happens is the Series A investors get, no matter what, they end up at 20% or whatever they owned prior to the new round. So it's as if the money that comes in has no dilution to them. So who does that squeeze? That squeezes the common shares. And so I went from 20% ownership down to 3%.
Oh, brutal. Yeah, because that was the only way to save the company, right? Is to get in whatever the 500K or whatever it is that you ended up.
Yeah. And people
bridging
ask
with.
me like, why didn't you bankrupt the company and just start it over? And I don't know. I just felt like that was wrong. You could have done that. We debated it for like a minute, and all three of us were like, no, these investors like believed in us, trusted us. We have now a path to build a real company that could be valuable. Why would we screw them? Even the guys at GE that we're super mad at because they're just being really mean to us, like they could wave the full ratchet. They decided not to, but like we didn't have to take their money.
Right. You guys signed the contract originally.
Yeah. And it's like,
term sheet.
It's more the honor of like, you promise an investor a return and you see a path to get it. You shouldn't weasel out of it. Right. Like you need to like deliver for the investor, even if it means you get less. And so that was sort of like a guiding principle that I've always had.
Is that something that you look for? I know you do some angel investing, and as you're evaluating a founder or a group of founders, are you looking for that? It's almost like a core value, right? Like somebody who's not going to weasel out when they can, because the easy answer was shut down the company, right? Restart it, clean slate, clean cap table. Like why go through the pain? But obviously you didn't. And I mean, I remember Adam and I in our own experience going through tough times at Thrive, like should we shut down the company? And all of this wasn't like, no, we have these investors, and it was always like a non-option. Like we needed to like fight through to get to the other side because of the people that had entrusted their money and their time with us, including our team. Do you feel like there's something you kind of test for when you talk to founders as you're thinking of investing or helping them?
Yeah, Max, I don't explicitly look for that, but I think I tend to like people who strike me as having that kind of like moral compass and integrity. And you can tell when you meet a founder who's like super slick and they seem like they're kind of willing to say anything and like their story's too good. It's like, that's actually to me scary. So I prefer people who are more like down to earth and
a little more real.
That served me really well, actually, like as an investor, like just finding people who are like real and like because those people tend to be sort of loyal to the spirit of the arrangement that, sometimes they lose all your money because the business idea doesn't go anywhere. But a lot of times those people pivot and figure something else out. Right. Yeah. So that's like,
I assume you look for that in people you hire as well, right? This sort of moral compass or some sort of unspoken thing. Do you test for that consciously or subconsciously?
No, we don't. But it is a super important part of like, I think it's just naturally part of the culture. Like I refuse to put integrity in the core values because it's like who are you going to interview and be like, hey, integrity is important to us? And they're like, I don't have that. Sorry. Nobody's going to admit that they have low integrity. So it's sort of like, what's the point?
It's so foundational that it's almost implied. Like if you don't have, like without it, you shouldn't even be interviewing at all.
Yeah, that's right.
What was that time like for you when you were going through, going from 20% to 3%, you were running out of money, your investors don't have your back. I mean, were you stressed? Were you not worried? Were you saying, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'll just get a job? What was your, mind like at that point in time?
I felt I had burned the boats.
Okay.
You familiar with that expression? Like,
of course. Like burn the boats. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's no going back. My resume looks like such crap now. I've left.
You're
Right.
unemployable.
I had my first job out of college I had for 6 months, right? Like then I
Yeah.
go to another job for 2 weeks, and then I go to this startup that fails, and then I start my own business. And if I put
And it's failing.
a failure next to that,
Yeah.
it's who's going to hire me? Like I look like a complete clown. So
Yeah. Well, there's
I
always
have
business
kinda
school,
no
right? Could have gotten your MBA.
Could I have even gotten into business school? I mean, yeah, like look at my grades at Tufts. That's it. That's all I have to show for myself. But yeah, so like that to me was like, I need to just stick this out. I need to persevere. And I saw a path, guys. Like we didn't talk about how I got my first customer, but like the first customer was like so pleased with the outcome. It was so painful getting her successful software, but she was so happy with the software that I was like, and she said, every staffing firm in the world needs software like this because we all have the same challenges. And it was like, okay, there's a business here. I don't know how many staffing firms there are in the United States, but there's got to be more than 100 that I could sell this to.
Yeah.
And that we can make this. My aspiration was like, we can make it like a $2 or $3 million business, maybe a $5 million business someday. And we'll make it work.
Yeah.
Like that was it. It was sort of like that's as far as I was thinking, but like, and if we get to 5 million, maybe somebody buys us and
something good happened. So you got,
and I didn't do the math. I'm like, and my take home will be like 50K or whatever. But in a way, like what a gift to be given an opportunity to work inside of a business that's going to be super successful and not given a huge equity slug.
Yeah.
You actually have to, the whole team has to get to a big outcome to make anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that made sure that we never raised another drop of venture money, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we just focused on getting profitable, which I think every software company in the planet now and technology company is like, how do I get profitable? It's like,
right.
You do it by spending less than you're bringing in. Like it's that simple. Like it's like an old school. It's like really, and we were like, what do we need these people for? What are they doing? Like, what are these people that we've hired under the venture money doing? We have these marketing people. We don't even have product. Like, what are we thinking? And so like, we really kind of like got super thrifty. And it was like, every hire was like, how are we going to make money off that person?
Yeah.
Very different mindset. And I talk to entrepreneurs today. They're like, we just need these people. We need all these engineers. And I'm like, if you can't articulate why, like, then you're not running a business. That's a nonprofit. Like you should go 501c3 and just, public benefit.
So did you have to downsize the team to get to a point where you're profitable?
We did. Yeah. I mean, we had hired somebody to do business development, and it's like that. Who's going to partner with a company that doesn't have product yet? And we had hired somebody, some expensive marketing people, and like, it was going to be hand-to-hand combat direct sale. And so, and we were pivoting from a sort of a online model to a B2B SaaS company. And so different skill sets. That was so painful. It was so painful letting people go in a company. Like it always is. It like never gets easier. It's like super painful because, it's personal. It's not just a job for people. It's like, that's where these are the people they talk to every day, and they feel like they're working on something and they're trying to make progress, and they feel part of the team, and like being traded. Hey, you're not part of this team anymore. It's super painful.
Makes you really careful when you hire the next people. Making sure that you're doing that carefully and you're not getting ahead of your skis. You don't want to go through it again.
Always in the back of your mind. Every interview, you're like, I would hate to have to let this person go.
Yeah.
And could I see myself needing to do that if there were a downturn? Then I should not hire that person.
Right. And so you downsized the team, you raised a little bit of bridge capital. I'm sure there was still a lot of pressure to make sure you could grow the revenue enough. And were you at that point, were you explicitly saying with your co-founders, hey, we're going to go for profitability? Or was that still a
Oh yeah.
question? You thought maybe we're going to get more venture? No, you said like, that's it with the venture.
We will never take vulture capital again.
And you took some later. We'll get there, but like
we did in 2008. Looks like a venture round, but is really, I would say, was the first phase of us doing a private equity like deal.
Okay,
that was
interesting.
Let's get the cap table cleaned up because it had been 12 years and we were 20 million in revenue. And we were profitable.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to give all the investors a return. We've got investors who've been on for 12 years. Let's wipe the cap table clean, go forward with the investors who believe into where we're going and are excited for us to continue on the journey. And so most of that capital that we raised from General Catalyst and Highland Capital and in 2008 was actually secondary liquidity.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we put the capital we put on the balance sheet, we actually stayed profitable. And so you didn't need it. We didn't use it. It was total, like, it was from it was really bad use of capital. But
expensive capital.
But, we had a plan to lose money, but the company at that point was just growing profitably and we just couldn't hire fast enough. And so we kept growing profitably.
What happened? So you got the company profitable and then you told us about 2008 when you cashed some people out. What happened in the interim? So if were your co-founders still all in? I know they left at some point. And did you get any more shares in the company? Were you guys paying yourselves dividends? Like, why were you happy being at this thing with 3%? Like, what was going on?
I was taking a modest salary. So were my co-founders. Okay. Sort of like right in line with the comp data. Like we would just do comp studies and here's what CEOs make inside of companies this size. And it was,
Did you have a board at this point? Or like, were they all gone?
Yeah.
Or
No, we had the GE guys on the board and we had a couple outsiders on the board and one angel. Okay. And the GE guys were very like, you guys want to give yourselves raises? Like, okay, we'll consider it. It was not easy to like, we weren't just like, hey, pay yourself, whatever. Like, so we were profitable just accumulating cash. And I wish we were dividending out. That would have been cool. Nobody suggested that at the time. The cash balance was just growing. And then I would propose like we should get some more options for me and Barry and Roger. And then when Highland and GC came in, they were like, you guys don't own any. We own, like, we had sort of walked our way back up to like 4% ownership.
Wow.
It was
not nearly enough.
And then Highland came in and said, let's create a real option pool and let's, and GC was part of that. And they were great. But like, yeah, like even then when Vista came in, I still only owned, I think 5 or 6% or something like that. So, we never got to like 10% ownership. And by the way, we had ISO, our options were all ISO. So like, it was all ordinary income when we cashed out because we didn't have any money to exercise, which by the way, I could have exercised for like $40,000 or something like that. And like ended up paying ordinary income eventually when Vista came in. But like, who cares? Like, who cares? And it doesn't matter. It was all like, it's all been like super wonderful journey. Like once we got past the pain of that down round, the one down round, but like, now like certainly, I don't begrudge that situation or the guys at GE at all. Like, it's just, it is what it is. That was just business. And now we've built a huge business and done 3 private equity transactions. And it's like, it's not like, oh yeah, like I just, I really wish I had those extra shares. That would be nice. But at a certain point,
the pie's big enough at some point.
Yeah. I mean, the pie's like plenty. It's
pretty big
pie. Yeah. So.
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Max.
No, I was going to say that as you were talking about profitability, I imagine after kind of the boom, the bust in 2000, and a lot of the similarities that we've seen, we're just talking about it, right? With the rounds getting done in 4 weeks, 10 million pre, like it was so easy in 99, in 2021. And we're seeing now everybody fleeing to the other side. Everybody wants to be profitable, which seems like the way it should have been all the time. However, there's this idea of like it's cycles. Do you think we are in a cycle where people are going back to profitability, but it'll at some point go on the other side where, boom again and everybody's raising crazy valuations, burning capital without a lot of thoughtful allocation of it? Or do you think we're here to stay with the profitability?
That's a good question. I don't think the tech industry has been profitable since, I think maybe in the 80s and 90s it was. Like most companies had to be profitable. We've been like, I actually think the lack of profitability has been directly influenced by monetary policy because, because capital's so cheap and these LPs can't get returns in bonds or, safer vehicles. They've turned to private equity and VC, and that's the only place to get, other than public equities, like that's the only place to get a return. And so like it's been really easy to raise fund after fund, and you get all these guys like funding competitors to, okay, like I'll fund Bullhorn, and I was the runner up on Bullhorn, and my term sheet didn't get accepted, so I'll fund their competitor, and we'll just incinerate capital together because it's free. Capital's essentially free. And so now that capital's not free, I think we're going to be in a environment where profitability matters until interest rates go back down significantly. And if they start to stay at 5-6%, SOFR, I think that will probably, you'll see some like AI, certainly there's going to be capital incineration. But eventually people are going to say, okay, I actually know what the return profile of these investments look like, and I know what a good business looks like. And so I think we're going to see profitability be the trend for a while. But if interest rates, if they cut interest rates this year, forget it. It'll be back to Bacchanalia. People will be, Champagne Tuesdays. Let's go.
Right. I'm also wondering from the eyes of a young founder who's out there, maybe pre-seed, they raise some angel money and now they're looking to raise their A. If you have a chart on your forecast that puts you in profitability, like where's the hockey stick? Where's the, huge outcome for that VC to put the money in and for it to make sense for them? Right. So it's a tough story to tell if you're in that kind of early stage, getting some traction. Like, what do you do? I don't know that I know the answer.
I do think there's this treadmill of like, well, I have to get VC money. And then when you get your A round, you have to get your B. And the only way to do that, point A to point B, is, like you said, is to show extraordinary growth. Bullhorn never should have taken venture. We should have been a bootstrap startup, and we should have gone from bootstrap to private equity, because once we found the business model that worked really well, just didn't require that much capital to get it going. You were in
and probably more patient capital as well.
We're in a vertical market. We can name all of our prospects. Yeah, they're like tens of thousands of them, but they're in a database.
They're knowable.
Like, you know who they are. You can go to like 7 trade shows and see them all. It's great. It's a great, very capital efficient sales. Like, the customer retention is like fantastic because it's a system of record that the customer needs to run their business. Like, why do you need to incinerate capital? And there's so many businesses like that. Like, why do you need to go fast? The only answer is if somebody's funding your competition and they are as good at what you do as you are. And so in that case, you're forced to deploy you're only as good as the capital strategy of your dumbest competitor, right? So if your dumbest competitor raises 20 million and you don't, how are you going to outrun them? And so I think that's the challenge. But in this climate, investors are backing one horse, in a market, maybe two, but they're not backing 7 or 8 that are all doing the same thing.
And a lot of those dumbest competitors that were burning money are now shutting down, right? And
Yes.
so that competition is going away. There's this huge trend of these companies going out of business. Companies were worried, okay, these guys are taking over the market, and then all of a sudden they're gone because what nobody realizes, they were running out of cash, and now nobody's willing to put more in, and they're out.
They're out, or what I'm seeing is they're narrowing their focus of what they do to something very, very achievable, as opposed to saying we do everything for all these customers and we're going to be AI for this, or people are like, we're AI for medical diagnostics, or like something very narrow, which is going to be really good because it's going to allow people to go deep for the customer, provide real value, create real companies that can eventually grow and branch out and get into other things. But it's like, go solve real problems, right? Like that's ultimately what a market, this is the best market to start a business, frankly. Like it's because the noise, the customers aren't inundated with like pitches from thousands of companies that all do the same thing. It's like, you can go and sit with a customer and have a conversation about problems in their business and how you can solve them. And then you solve them and you come back and you get paid. It's great.
Yeah. So you mentioned you should have been bootstrapped from the beginning and then just gone to PE. You are a rare bird that seems to love PE as a founder, operator, CEO for 25 years, of a company. Very unusual. Why is that? Why has PE worked for you and not for others? I know you love Vista originally, you thought they were a great partner, but I feel like there's got to be more to that story.
So private equity aligns really well if you believe that you should make profits as a business, right? Like that's fundamentally, like, shouldn't every entrepreneur think that business should make money? But fundamentally, like in tech, it's rare. Most founders are like, just grow, grow, grow. And like, you can grow and be really profitable. Like, we all talk about rule of 40, rule of 50. Bullhorn's typically a rule of 50 company. We grow a lot and we make a lot of money, and we take that money and we use that and what's awesome about private equity is that instead of just like, we would have conversations when we were venture backed of like, could we do an acquisition? And it's like, you gotta get a huge return on every dollar of equity that you invest in an acquisition. Very hard to make any sense of an acquisition.
Yeah.
When you can use debt, you just have to pay back the debt. And that's like a totally different calculus. Like, hey, I can spend 10 times revenue on this company or 5 times revenue on this company. Yeah, that's a lot of money. But if I could grow revenue to, say, by 2 or 3x, and most of that drops to the bottom line, I can pay back the debt like in 1 year's cash flow. And that's kind of like how you start to think of it. And then you can start to think about like, what do my customers buy? What could I offer them that would be better together if I were offering it? And it's just a really, I love private equity. I think it's really cool. Someday if debt goes to 11% interest rates,
be a
12%,
different calculation.
15%. Yeah, it's hard. The debt service becomes an issue, but at 5% SOFR, it's still historically low. It's like, let's go. Like we can get an awesome return. And yeah, you become a little bit more of like a structured finance person when you embrace private equity, and like, cool, like
Yeah.
this is all just a math formula. Yeah, and you got to use the IRR function a lot, and you use like you figure out at compounding interest, and like you're doing cash flow models, and like, but that just really, I enjoy it. I think it's fun.
That's
Do you
awesome.
think at some point you might cross over to the dark side, become a
And
private equity investor yourself?
I don't know. I don't know that yeah, I don't know. I'm I have a job, right? So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what I would do next. I spend most of my time thinking about like, okay, how do we get to $1 billion in revenue? Like, what's that look like? And that's most of my cycles are spent on that. So
Makes sense.
someday if they tap me on the shoulder and say, all right, your journey at Bullhorn is over, then I
you'll
will
think
give
about
that.
it.
Yeah, certainly I've thought to myself, could I do that job? Like, yeah, I probably would be decent at it. I certainly understand the math behind it. And how do you generate a return, and what does a good private equity return need to look like to get this private equity sponsor excited? I spent a lot of time thinking about the psychology of like, who's going to buy Bullhorn stock and why, and what are they going to put in their model? So what do we need to look like, and what does the financial profile need to do, and what do they need to believe in order for us to get the next deal done? I spent a lot of time with my team on that. Like, how are we going to continue to capitalize the business as we march to $1 billion in revenue? And so
Yeah.
that is a focus, but it's not it's more like the how of how we're going to get from point A to point B. Like, it's how are we going to make sure that we have the right investors supporting and sponsoring this business so that we can grow it to what we want to do with the business. And so, but you need to understand, like, and anybody who's doing a model, like, anybody who's trying to raise capital, you should model what is the return that the venture capitalist is going to get. What is the return that the private equity person, if you don't understand that,
And make sure they're going to be happy.
yeah, right? Because they're not going to invest unless they think they can make them their investors money. And so, like, why would you go start pitching people on investing in your business if you don't understand like how they're going to make that's like pitching a customer without understanding how they're going to get a return. Like, you would never do that. Like, oh, you should just buy this thing. It might work for you. It might help. No, we sit there and we're like, look at all, like, this will save you this much money. Like, same thing for the investors. Like, they are going to run a model on your business and say, here's how I make money. And by the way, they're going to take your bullshit model that's got 150% growth, and they're going to put real figures in there.
Yeah.
And they're going to put real expense figures in there. And they're not going to just, bring it to 30%, income and 50% growth. They're not going to model a rule of 80 company. They're going to model a rule of 40 company. Can they make money? And if they can't, what are you doing? Like,
and that's the best case scenario, right? Because they're also modeling the worst case scenario.
They're also modeling, yes, they're also modeling what happens if they don't get the growth. Is this a management team I believe will actually manage expenses properly? Right.
Capital needs as those different models play out. Yeah, those
I think
different
that's
scenarios.
interesting advice. I don't think I see a lot of founders doing that, basically putting themselves in the shoes of the investor and modeling out, what is it going to take for this investor to be happy, and sort of trying to, backtrack into, is that the journey I want to be on? I don't hear a lot of people doing that.
You're absolutely right. You don't see that. The other thing I don't see, and when I sit with founders who want to sell their businesses and they're like, I have this term sheet and it's the same valuation you're offering me. You say, okay, but let's do the math on, like, do you believe you can hit a growth profile to make the same amount of money you're going to make if I buy your business for cash right now?
Right.
And a lot of times the answer is, shit, I'd have to grow it like 50% for the next 5 years to make this, because of the dilution. Yeah, there's a lot of dilution. They don't do the dilution math on, like, what has to happen for me to make more money by raising capital.
Yeah.
Because a lot of businesses shouldn't. It's like, hey, if you can only grow 20% a year, you should get profitable, throw off 20% EBITDA, and control your future. Just don't raise money. You don't got to sell it to me, but you definitely shouldn't dilute yourself.
Get off the treadmill.
Incinerate a bunch of capital that's not going to increase your growth rate.
Yeah. So you have, again, such an incredible story, unusual. I literally don't know anyone who has grown a company from nothing to closing in on $500 million over 25 years, long period of time, and is still excited. If I were your investors, if I worked at your company, I'd be thinking, gee, what do we do to keep Art excited? And you clearly are excited about what you're doing. Why? What are you doing to keep yourself motivated, to keep yourself excited to be in the arena? You've obviously made money along the way, right? Like, why are you continuing to do this? What gets you excited?
Yeah. How do we get Art excited? It's like, put me in front of a customer who has a problem that I can solve with tech. It's the same thing of like, I've always been building software that like helps people's jobs become easier. And that's like, so AI comes along and it's like, we can use generative to make recruiters more productive in their jobs, and staffing firms can use this tech to be having more interesting conversations with people about career moves and things like that, versus generating emails that say, "Dear hiring manager, please see the resume for Max. He is great. He worked at this company." Like, AI can do that. Like, and so here is a feature that gives you, the recruiter, back like 2 hours of your day. For me, that's magic. I love stuff like that. I love, like, I'm not coding it anymore.
Sure.
Every once in a while I threaten to like dust off my keyboard and get in there, because it's like, it's fun. My son's learning how to program in Python in school, and
That's
I'm like
awesome.
enjoying like every once in a while helping him with that. But like for me, it's like, okay, we can execute, and I know we can build it. I know we can build it and make the customer happy, or we can buy this company that's got the good shell of like their product's cool, but we could make it even cooler. And like, I just think, that's fun. It's just really fun. And then the customer tells you, oh yeah, like that thing's awesome. And that for me is like, that's it. Like, it keeps me going.
Yeah.
And I get so hurt still to this day, when I have a customer in my inbox, we screwed up their implementation and he's like not happy. And I'm like, Chris, we're going to fix this. Like, we can and it pains me to hear it. It's like, we didn't do this, or we didn't set you up with that right. That's not configured properly. Let's get in there and fix it. And it's like, that's painful for me. And he has no idea how much pain he's put me through in the last 24 hours. But like, we'll get through it. And it's like, I take it personally. It's like as if my name is Bullhorn and people are like, Bullhorn sucks. And I'm like, Art Pappas sucks. No, like,
we can't have that. Yeah. No, I think a lot of founders have that, just the churn. For me, I know it just burns. It never seems to get better. You take it personally.
When a customer tells you, yeah, we're going to go to something else, you're like,
shit, I failed.
Like, yeah. It's like getting broke up with. It's like, I'm getting dumped.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that coming. Or I did see it coming, and we couldn't get in front. I couldn't like do the right thing or say the right thing to get it to go back to the way it was. It's just, it's like, it's painful. But that's like, I think that's the fun, right? Like, if you're just doing it for the money, it's like, man, that's just sad.
Well, Art, this has been amazing. I love hearing about your story. Truly, truly incredible company. We've known each other for a long time, and the story just keeps getting better. Like you said, when we were getting on this call, every time we check in, you guys have grown leaps and bounds since the last time. So really wish you the best of luck going forward. And thank you so much for taking your time to do this today.
Thanks guys. It was fun. It was good to be chatting again.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your story is inspiring.